The most important thing to understand about Led Zeppelin is that
there weren't many guitarists in the area at that point. You'd hear of other guitarists and meet other guitarists.
Jimmy Page isn't just a guitarist. He's the architect of modern rock. A sonic wizard who built Led Zeppelin's empire. For decades, he has remained one of music's most enigmatic figures, a master craftsman whose own work set an impossibly high bar for all who followed. After years of speculation, Page has finally revealed the one band that earned his ultimate secret admiration above all others. But they weren't the only ones. Today, we'll explore the other select artists who also won his respect, right before we get to his absolute number one. 1. Cream.
Free access to, my huge, at that time, record collection, which was,
The biggest secret about Jimmy's admiration is finally here. In the city of London in the late 1960s, a new kind of king ruled the music scene. That king was a band called Cream. The group was made up of 3 musical masters: Eric Clapton on guitar, Jack Bruce on bass, and Ginger Baker on drums. They were known as rock music's very first supergroup because each member was already famous for being a genius on his instrument.
No, but what they played in relation to the contemporary music scene was still, startling because it was all still advanced.
Together, they created a sound that was much bigger, louder, and more powerful than anything people had heard before. For Jimmy Page, who was figuring out his next move after leaving his old band, the Yardbirds, Cream was both an inspiration and a big target. He admired their amazing musical skill. He loved how they took old American blues songs and stretched them out into long, exciting jams. They created the recipe for the power trio, and the world was completely blown away. The real story, however, was the quiet but intense competition between Jimmy Page and Cream's guitarist, Eric Clapton. Around that time in London, a strange thing started happening. Someone started spray painting graffiti on walls that said, "Clapton is God." This message appeared all over the city on brick walls and fences. The music magazines wrote about it, and soon everyone saw Clapton as the ultimate guitar hero.
Just with no chance of doing anything, had no hope anywhere, except I channeled everything into playing the guitar, and then the other things sort of followed on.
He was worshipped for the pure, soulful feeling in his guitar playing. Jimmy Page was also a guitar hero, but he was a different kind. He was the quiet, mysterious expert who worked in the recording studio, a magician who knew how to build amazing sounds using technology and clever tricks. While Clapton was being treated like a god in public, Page was secretly planning a musical revolution. He looked at Cream and thought, "That's good, but I can do better." He felt that Cream, even with their incredible talent, was limited.
The guy you were looking at on that Smothers Brothers show was just the result of that, of just too many situations.
Page dreamed of a band that had all of Cream's power, but was even heavier, more exciting, and had more of a show. The real scandal was a battle of ideas and ambition. Cream was famous for the fighting between its members. Bassist Jack Bruce and drummer Ginger Baker were known to have huge arguments. They were musical partners, but they often acted like they hated each other. There are famous stories of them trying to play louder than one another on stage, turning a musical conversation into a screaming match.
People here are more interested in sort of expanding the sound, the groups here do a lot more with sound than they do in America.
This fighting is what ultimately tore the band apart. When Cream announced they were breaking up in 1968, it left a giant hole in the world of rock music. They had proved that a heavy band could be incredibly popular. Jimmy Page saw this as the perfect opportunity. He moved very fast to put together Led Zeppelin, a band he designed specifically to take Cream's place. He took their 3-man power idea and made a crucial addition, a powerful singer with a high-pitched scream that could fly over the heavy music.
Because when we disbanded Cream and they weren't around anymore, Led Zeppelin filled the voids and they became the first kind of official heavy metal band. So maybe Cream was...
Where Cream played long blues jams, Page planned to write epic songs that told stories about myths and magic. He mixed the blues with folk music and sounds from other countries. He admired Cream for kicking open the door to heavy rock, but he planned to blow that door off its hinges and build a giant castle for himself. He aimed to conquer the world of heavy rock, but to be the true kings, he had to challenge the most famous band on earth. Jimmy Page was a master strategist, not just a musician. If you want to keep exploring the secret rivalries that defined rock history, hit that subscribe button now. 2. The Beatles.
When you go out on stage and you get a great big scream, it doesn't matter that it's a scream. There's nothing deep behind a scream. You know, a scream's just the same as a roar at a football match.
No mountain in the 1960s music world was higher than the Beatles. They were much more than just a band. They were a worldwide event that changed everything about music, fashion, and culture for young people. For a musician like Jimmy Page, who had huge ambitions, the Beatles were the ultimate symbol of success. His admiration for them was all mixed up with a powerful need to be even bigger than them. This wasn't a friendly race. It was a quiet war over what rock music should be. The war was fought on the album charts, on the radio, and in the minds of music lovers everywhere. Page was dedicated to creating a heavy, powerful, and mystical sound. He deeply respected the amazing, God-given talent the Beatles had for writing perfect, catchy songs. He knew they were geniuses. But he also felt their music didn't have the raw, thunderous power he wanted to create. The real scandal was the hidden, behind-the-scenes war between the two bands' powerful managers. Led Zeppelin was managed by a man named Peter Grant, who was a giant of a man and a former professional wrestler.
What makes a girl good? I don't know. Oh no, I'm just helping it.
He was incredibly tough and fiercely protective of his band. He saw the Beatles and their huge company, Apple Corps, as the old, boring establishment that he needed to defeat. To do this, Peter Grant made a shocking and revolutionary decision. He announced that Led Zeppelin would not release any singles in the United Kingdom. In the 1960s, a band's success was measured by how many hit singles they had on the pop charts.
Not necessary, but it helps, you know, it gives a good atmosphere. We all love it.
Some is.
No, but it's nice when there's a lot of noise going on. It's like a football match.
Singles got played on the radio and made the band famous. Grant's no singles policy was a direct attack on the way the Beatles did business. He and Page believed that their albums were complete stories, like movies or books, that needed to be experienced from beginning to end. It was a bold statement. It said that Led Zeppelin's music was serious art, not just disposable pop songs.
You know, I like it more than anybody else likes it.
As Led Zeppelin became more and more popular, their heavy album-focused style started to make the pop music world feel a little old and out of touch. They offered fans a totally different experience. While the Beatles were singing I Want to Hold Your Hand or Penny Lane, Led Zeppelin was creating dark, heavy songs like Dazed and Confused and Whole Lotta Love, filled with lyrics about magic and ancient myths. The culture was changing, and Led Zeppelin was leading the charge. When the Beatles finally broke up in 1970, Led Zeppelin was perfectly positioned to take their place as the kings of music. They had just released Led Zeppelin III, a huge selling album that mixed heavy rock with soft acoustic folk music. They were about to record their fourth album, which would become one of the best-selling records of all time. For many young fans, the Beatles were the past and Led Zeppelin was the future. Page admired the Beatles for their incredible songs and their place in history, but his life's mission was to create something so powerful and timeless that it would make even the biggest band in the world seem like a memory. While he battled the clean-cut idols, he held a darker, more personal fascination with rock's ultimate bad boys. 3. The Rolling Stones.
But you know, it's not really like that at all.
It's just been by the press and everything, really, because it's not that strong, really, at all. We're not hated by all that many people, I'm sure, really.
If the Beatles were the smiling, lovable face of 1960s British rock, the Rolling Stones were its snarling, dangerous soul. They were the ultimate bad boys who played raw, dirty blues music, and Jimmy Page was deeply connected to their dark world long before Led Zeppelin was even a thought. His admiration for the Stones was for their pure power and their absolute refusal to compromise their rebellious image. Before he was a famous rock star, Page was one of the best session guitarists in London, and his playing can be heard on countless records from that era. Not many people know that he played acoustic guitar on an early demo version of the Stones' classic song, Heart of Stone. He was in the room with them, a small part of their unique sound before they became the biggest rock and roll band in the world. He understood their music on a deep level because he had helped to create it.
Well, we're happy, you know, really. We've been working very hard since 1969 as a band on the road, and we've worked a lot. We did a long tour in 69, we did a lot of touring in 70, 71.
But the connection goes much deeper and gets into much more scandalous territory. The real story is about his complicated relationship with Anita Pallenberg, the beautiful model and actress who was Keith Richards' longtime girlfriend. Page and Pallenberg had a very strong bond because they both shared a deep and serious interest in the occult, especially the dark teachings of the famous mystic Aleister Crowley. Crowley was a controversial figure from the early 20th century who called himself a magician and practiced dark rituals. Page was so obsessed with Crowley that he eventually bought Crowley's old house, Boleskine House, which sat on the shores of Loch Ness in Scotland and was rumored to be a place of dark magic. This shared interest in magic and mystery created a powerful connection between Page and Pallenberg. For years, rumors have persisted that their relationship was much more than just a simple friendship, which created a quiet but serious tension with Keith Richards. This dark, personal link is essential to understanding Page's admiration for the Stones. He didn't just see them as another great band. He was attracted to their entire lifestyle and their embrace of the darkness that rock and roll promised. Pallenberg was a huge influence on the Stones. She wasn't just a girlfriend, she helped shape their style and attitude. So, Page's close relationship with her was a big deal in their private world. While Mick Jagger was the flashy performer out front, Page likely saw Keith Richards as the true beating heart of the band. He was another guitar player who lived and breathed the blues and was not afraid to explore the wild and dangerous side of life. The scandal wasn't just about a rumored love triangle. It was about a shared journey into the more mystical and dangerous parts of fame.
Moronic, I think, is the best word. Moronic, yes.
What's he talking about?
Led Zeppelin's music was filled with lyrics and symbols about magic, myths, and ancient folklore. Page's fascination with the Stones was partly because they seemed to be living out those dark rock and roll fantasies in real life. He respected their music, but he may have admired their courage to live in the shadows even more. He was drawn to their rebellious spirit, but he also had a complicated history with a band known for pure, explosive chaos. Page was drawn to the shadows of rock and roll. If you're fascinated by these darker stories and hidden connections, make sure you're subscribed. The chaos is just getting started. 4. The Who.
How long ago was it? Week, 10 days?
12 years.
12 years ago?
That piece of film was actually made by a man called Kit Lambert, who was the first real manager of The Who.
The Who, long before the iconic Led Zeppelin blimp ever flew over a stadium, the idea for the band's name was born during a messy, drunken conversation with members of another legendary British band, The Who. Jimmy Page's admiration for The Who was built on one thing above all else: pure, uncontrollable volume and wild energy. In the mid-1960s, The Who had a reputation as the loudest and most destructive band in all of London. On stage, Pete Townshend would swing his arm in a giant circle, creating a roaring wall of guitar noise, while drummer Keith Moon would attack his drum set like a human tornado.
And we wanted to be free of it as much as possible and get onto new things and to get down to the business of doing something new.
Bassist John Entwistle stood perfectly still, but his thundering bass lines felt like a small earthquake. For Page, who was trying to create the most powerful rock band the world had ever seen, The Who were both an inspiration and a direct challenge. The most famous story that connects these two bands is the one that gave Led Zeppelin its name. The legend says that Page was in a recording studio in London to play on a song called Beck's Bolero, written by his friend Jeff Beck. The group of musicians in the studio that day was incredible. Page and Beck on guitars, John Paul Jones on bass, who Page would later recruit for Zeppelin, Nicky Hopkins on piano, and Keith Moon on drums. The energy in the room was electric. They started joking about how they should all quit their current bands and form a new supergroup together. Keith Moon, who was famous for his wild sense of humor, laughed and said that a band with all of them in it would probably be a complete disaster. It would go down like a lead balloon, he joked, meaning it would fail miserably. John Entwistle, The Who's bassist who was also there, supposedly added, "Yeah, a Led Zeppelin." The name stuck in Jimmy Page's head. It was the perfect name for the kind of music he wanted to make, something that was incredibly heavy and powerful, but that could also float and soar. The scandal in this relationship was the pure, unfiltered chaos that always surrounded The Who, and especially Keith Moon. Moon was legendary for his insane behavior. He was famous for destroying hotel rooms and blowing up toilets with explosives. In one famous incident on an American TV show, he packed his drum kit with too much gunpowder.
Something purely destructive. I felt that visually and sometimes musically, but mostly visually, it had an incredible dynamic. It was very exciting.
When it exploded at the end of the song, it created a huge blast that knocked the show's host over, set Pete Townshend's hair on fire, and reportedly damaged Townshend's hearing permanently. Page, who was a careful planner and a genius in the recording studio, must have watched Moon with a combination of wonder and fear. He deeply admired the raw, wild spirit that Moon brought to rock music. That untamed energy was something Page wanted to capture for his own band, but he knew that it had to be controlled.
How do you do it? How do you patch up?
Well, at the moment, The Who haven't actually...
He had seen what happened in his old bands when big egos were allowed to run wild. With Led Zeppelin, he would take the explosive power of a drummer like Keith Moon, but find a drummer who also had incredible skill and discipline. That drummer was John Bonham, a man who had Moon's power but also had a deep sense of groove and control. Page took the basic idea of The Who's sonic attack and made it bigger, tighter, and much more epic. He harnessed their explosive power, but he also watched a quiet rival build entire worlds out of sound. 5. Pink Floyd.
Everybody in the band has a power of veto almost.
Not all of Jimmy Page's admiration was for loud, blues-driven rock bands. He held a quiet, professional respect for a group that was one of his biggest rivals for the title of biggest band of the 1970s, Pink Floyd. This wasn't a rivalry that involved public fights or insults in the music magazines. It was more like a Cold War, fought with massive stage shows, revolutionary album covers, and the loyalty of millions of fans. Pink Floyd's music was the polar opposite of Led Zeppelin's.
I mean, everybody listens. We don't need it very loud to be able to hear it, and with some of it is very quiet, in fact. Right. Personally, I like quiet music just as much as loud music.
It was psychedelic, atmospheric, and built on long, dreamy musical passages instead of heavy, aggressive guitar riffs. As a master of the recording studio, Page surely admired Pink Floyd's incredible talent for creating entire landscapes of sound. He surely appreciated their technical brilliance and their groundbreaking use of synthesizers and studio effects to build unique worlds for the listener to explore. The competition between the two bands was often about who could push the rock and roll experience further. Both bands famously hired a London design company called Hypnosis to create their legendary album covers. The results were a study in contrast. Pink Floyd's cover for The Dark Side of the Moon featured a clean, scientific-looking prism, suggesting mystery, science, and space. Led Zeppelin's cover for Houses of the Holy, released the same year, featured strange, naked children climbing over mysterious rocks, suggesting ancient myths and unsettling folklore. The rivalry extended to their concerts. Both bands toured the world with enormous, complicated stage shows, each trying to top the other. Pink Floyd was famous for their giant circular video screen, their detailed short films, a crashing airplane, and a huge inflatable pig that floated over the audience. The show was the star. For Led Zeppelin, the spectacle was the band itself. The show was built around the raw power of the four musicians, enhanced by lasers, smoke, and Page's famous dragon suit and violin bow solo. There are stories of the two bands working at the legendary Abbey Road studios in London at the same time, recording their classic albums in different rooms down the hall from each other. They would nod and acknowledge each other when they passed, but the relationship was said to be very professional and distant, not close or friendly. The scandal wasn't personal. It was a quiet, intense battle for the top of the mountain. Page would have respected David Gilmour's beautiful and emotional guitar playing and Roger Waters' ambitious album-long story concepts. While Zeppelin's music came from a place of raw power and ancient myths, Pink Floyd's music was more intellectual, exploring themes of madness, greed, and time. Page knew that they were the only other band on Earth that was operating on the same gigantic scale as Led Zeppelin. He probably never wanted to sound like them, but he undoubtedly admired their incredible ambition and their unique ability to capture the minds of millions of fans by taking them on a journey to a different reality. These bands were more than just rivals. They were the mirrors Page used to shape his own grand vision. They were the giants he had to slay to build his own legend. Jimmy Page didn't just play rock, he plotted its takeover. If you enjoyed this look inside the mind of a legend, drop a like and subscribe for more.